Meeting is being recorded. I think you all know that. Some of this may show up on social media, so don't be shy. Welcome to Online Presenters Toastmasters, where we learn skills for better webinars and online events. We want to thank RingCentral for allowing us to use the RingCentral Meetings platform at no cost. It's a customized version of Zoom that's integrated with some of their other internet communications products. We encourage you to pay attention to your sound, mute your mic when it's not your turn, and understand the video modes, how to toggle between seeing everybody in the gallery view and going to the speaker view. Watch the time if you are speaking. It's not a bad idea to have your own timing device handy, just in case you do lose track of the feed from the speaker. From the timer, that is, I'm sorry. And if you are visiting as a guest, I don't think we have any guests here tonight, do we? We have some signed up, so they may be coming in at any moment. Anybody's watching on the replay, if you decide to become a member, click the join button, and there are instructions there about our membership criteria. With that, it is showtime. Jimmy, do you have something that you want to say as president to introduce the meeting before we turn it over to Carol? Okay, Carol, I'm going to go ahead and make you the host.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be on. I would like to introduce first we have National Cookie Day, or International Cookie Day as far as I'm concerned, because we're an international club. So what's your favorite flavor? Please put it out on the chat line, your favorite cookie. And if you don't like cookies, figure it out real fast. What's your favorite of the ones that you don't like? All right. There you go. We're getting a whole bunch listed now. And let's move on and introduce our helpers. We have a whole bunch of helpers. And yes, it is different from what is in the online version. So our counter, Jim and Chris, your role.
We will be counting and listening very carefully for the ahs, the ers, the no's, then the crutch words that come out there. And we might, I don't know, we're just going to holler at somebody or make a little ding noise. But
we will report at the end of the meeting on the count for the ahs.
Great. Thank you so much. Our timer, David Carr.
I will be doing timing for the major portions of the meeting. You will see the time colors flashing up behind me. And does anybody want an audible signal this evening? We can do that as well if you want it. If you don't request it, I guess you won't get it. Maybe we should default to not doing it, since it does interrupt a little bit.
Thank you. And our grammarian, Adrian.
Hello, everybody. It will be my job to pay attention to any special creative words that you come up with. So definitely think of that, especially when we're talking about cookies. Back to you.
Thank you. Our watcher, Elaine.
I'll be watching y'all tonight. I'll be looking at how you're framed in the video space. I'll be looking at your lighting, your color, your use of gestures, also within the frame, that kind of stuff. And I'll report back later.
Fantastic. Our vote counter, Jim and Chris.
yeah, okay, we'll be a vote counter. We're on one computer here, so we will be counting the votes. You need to send them privately to us in the chat, and we'll be keeping an eye on that.
Thank you. Our chat monitor, Jimmy Dent.
Okay, I'll be monitoring the chat tonight. It's already been pretty active, so it looks like we're going to have a good chat session going on, and I'll report the content of the chat at the end of the meeting.
Fantastic. Well, that's it for our helpers, unless I missed somebody. Did I miss anybody? Nope. All right, let's get going. All right, so our favorite cookie, according to our vote counter, is?
Oh,
It's
well,
like chocolate chip.
looks like chocolate chip. It's one of my favorites. I really like the homemade soft
Yeah.
chunk chocolate chip.
With
There you go.
walnuts.
With walnuts, yeah. That some people are
Very good. And
wrong.
Adrienne likes the Thin Mints. That's a Girl Scout cookie. She's right after my heart. Thank you, Adrienne. I like that. So oatmeal raisin happens to be my favorite. So there was Angie liked oatmeal raisin. We have that in common. Let's move on. Now, we have 3 speakers tonight, so we don't have a lot of time, but let's just jump right in. Our first speaker, Norman Dowe, is speaking on the Motivational Strategies Level 1, Mastering Fundamentals, Evaluation and Feedback speech. This is his second speech of that level in regards to mastering this fundamental. His speech title is Desktop Publishing on a Dime, and he's calling it a redo. So redo. And that's not because he didn't do well the first time. It's simply because that's what the project requires. So please join me in welcoming, oh, wait a minute. Evaluator, you're all set to go, and that is Lois? Okay, very good. Please join me in welcoming Norman. What? Norman!
Okay, fellow Toastmasters, we spent an awful lot of time working on how professional our presentations are, speaking well and handling everything that goes along with doing an excellent job from the platform or in front of the camera. But are we as attentive to how our printed image is, the things that we publish ourselves, whether it's self-published books or brochures or flyers? Are we embarrassed by that self-published look? Some of us have struggled a lot with longer documents like books or reports. I call it the word formatting syndrome. We got it right and we make one change and chapters just get all out of sort. And no matter how we go, we chase after trying to make Word publish correctly. It's a problem. If you have these kinds of problems, you are ready for desktop publishing. And the major program for that the professionals use is InDesign. InDesign is industrial strength. It is commercial. It's available as software as a service. It's great support. It works on the standard desktops, laptops, Mac, Windows, but it's $20 per month. If you, like me, are on a budget and $20 a month for something that I'm not going to be using all the time is a little too much, well, there's something else. There's another alternative, is Scribus. It's really good. It's about 90% the features of InDesign. It's open source. It's popular in Europe and runs on Windows, the Mac, Linux. It doesn't have anywhere near the commercial support of InDesign, but there is an active community. And best of all, it is free. It takes in, or it takes as input, popular formats. For instance, the Word or Open Office, the image formats like the JPEG or PNG, SVG. It also would take in a PDF or PostScript. You can import your documents or parts of your document from these formats. And on the other side, it writes PDFs that are ready for professional printers. It will write out to your printer or even an image or JPG file. For instance, I've used Scribus to produce an image for my business card printer, required an image, not a PDF, but an image. Well, how does this work? If you are a self-published author, how are you going to use it? Well, here's a workflow. Whatever you like to write in, I tend to write in Scrivener, which is an author platform. People write in Word. After you write your document, you actually then export it to Word, because editors want Word. They want to make changes and track the changes. So you export it into Word. And once the editors have given you back the document, your next step is to design it, whether you're designing a brochure, designing a flyer, designing a book. What the chapters are, what the headers are, what fonts, where the exhibits are, and all so on. Once you have designed your document, you can then import both the text and then all the graphical images into Scrivener. Not Scrivener, excuse me, Scribus. And Scribus will actually then be able to produce a high-level, highly formatted document that's designed exactly the way that you have conceived it. It also will have some things that are a little hard to do in word processors. For instance, optical margins and the kinds of things you see in a newspaper with on page 1, a column starts and it continues on page 5. That's very, very easy in Scribus. There are a number of other professional things that you can do in Scribus that you could not easily do in a word processor. But I want to just encourage you not just to take my word for it, since it is free, and if you are interested in doing this, take the next steps. Download and install GoScript. Well, GoScript is actually provides a PostScript processing with Scribus. Download Scribus. There are 2 versions. There's a stable and a development version. I actually prefer the development version, but take your pick. They will merge in probably another 6 months to a year. Go through a couple of tutorials or classes. Take a small project, either a chapter or a book or a presentation, and then publish. Go ahead and try it. And then here is a list of the files. I'll put this in the chat so you can actually download these files. That is desktop publishing on a dime. Are there any questions? Okay. Well, start with Jim and Chris.
Norman, I had a question. I wanted to find out from you, what have you published on Scribus?
There's a book out called The Abrogation of the Seventh Commandment by the American Churches. Now, so that's actually, I published that. I'm also working on the autobiography of Amanda Berry Smith. I think Jim and Chris had a question.
Yeah, I use styles in Word extensively. Do they import and translate somehow in Scribus?
There are styles in Scribus, and I think that they will import, but I don't usually use them in Word, but Scribus works on styles. That's how it really functions. Styles and master pages to describe how the document will look. I think Lois had a question.
I did. What other applications did you use for publishing to be able to say that this was one of the best?
I had used word processing. I'd used Word. WordPerfect does a better job than Word. And before I switched over and said, okay, I'm going to go with, and I also had used InDesign until I couldn't afford it any longer. Okay, but I'm out of time. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Norman. It was a pleasure to see your growth in this speech. I love your slides, so I threw that out there on the chat. You've shown some improvement there. Thank you. Let's go on to our second speaker, John Quick. And he is going to serve up a roast tonight. How do you like it? Rare, medium, well done. Back to you. Let's see. His title is A Roast of David Carr. David Carr. And his speech time is 5 to 7 minutes. It's from the Special Occasion Speeches, Project 3, The Roast. Please join me in welcoming John Carr. Yay!
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. And Toastmasters, today we are honored to celebrate David F. Carr, some guy we know from our Toastmasters Club. As the founder of our club, David is a pioneer in more ways than one. We're among the very first online clubs in all of Toastmasters International. We have the ability to connect members from all around the world. And despite this fact, David managed to charter this online club solely with people that he already meets with in an in-person club in South Florida. Now, the innovation doesn't stop there. In his first term as club president, David began a tradition that we continue to this day. That is to begin every meeting with words of inspiration. I'll never forget what he told us. The cloud is winning, and Ring Central is winning in the cloud. I still wake up in the middle of the night, covered in sweat, screaming these words of inspiration. All right, let's go back in time a little bit and get to know David before he was a Toastmaster. He tells a story about being a newlywed at a Renaissance festival. That must have been some themed wedding. There was an axe thrower at the event. He's launching axes at watermelons, splitting them in half. Poor David happened to wander into the line of the sight of the axe thrower just before his release. Now, understandably, David's memory becomes unclear at this point. He usually jumps to the end of the story and says something like, "Thank goodness I'm still here today." What he doesn't like to reveal is that this was the moment he gained his technological superpowers. You see, that axe sliced right through the creative half of his brain, leaving him only with the logical, technical side to work with. But you know what? David would be the first person to tell you it's not such a bad thing working with half a brain. As a writer, David has always followed Ernest Hemingway's advice, which is to write about what you know. That perspective eventually led him to great success as the author of a book titled Social Collaboration for Dummies. Now, I checked out David's professional history as well. On LinkedIn, David describes himself as a versatile and inventive writer. But don't take his word for it. His editor at Forbes had this to say about him, and I quote, "I've been David's editor for much of the time he has worked with Forbes. I use the word in quotes because he's never actually needed a lot of editing. My job has consisted largely of glancing approvingly at what he sends in. David has a wonderfully intuitive sense of what is happening with technology and is deft at finding compelling ways to tell those stories. Definitely a keeper." Now, as I scrolled down his profile, I happened to notice that David's tenure with Forbes lasted about 2 years and ended in 2011, which was about 6 jobs ago. Definitely a keeper. After finding a home in writing and technology, David became a Toastmaster. He tells us that he joined Toastmasters because he needed to get out from behind the keyboard and up in front of a group of people. If you ever see him speak in person, in fact, you'll notice that he doesn't just get up, but he jumps up and sprints to the front of the room before giving a speech. Now, part of being a Toastmaster is we never judge people, no matter where they come from. And that's why on behalf of your teammates here at Toastmasters, David, we want you to know that you're always welcome to sprint back and hide behind your keyboard anytime you choose. We won't judge. Nevertheless, I know that David won't back down from a challenge. He is a fierce competitor. When I first saw him, he was practicing to give a keynote speech in Germany. After he returned home a few weeks later, he told us everything went great. But when I ended my speech in front of an audience of German technology executives, I turned to the side, stuck out my hand, and proudly said, "Contest Master." David, it's not a competition. Sometimes you gotta slow down. There's only one keynote speaker. You know what, but I suppose David reminds us that sometimes our toughest competition is ourselves. Well, thank you, David, for all of the wisdom and inspiration you have given us. Contest Master.
John, sometimes it's not a contest. Yeah. All right. Just making sure you know that. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. You do have a few comments over in the chat box for both you and David. I'm going to move on to the third speaker. Our third speaker is Angela Smucker, and she is giving a speech tonight that's from the Competent Communicator. I'm not exactly sure which project. Hopefully the evaluator knows that. Let me look over here and see.
Oh, it's the one where you're introducing yourself.
Competent Communicator?
Yeah.
Or do you mean special occasion speeches?
No, not special occasion speeches.
Is it Icebreaker?
That's the one. That's the one.
There you go. Sunny Icebreaker timer. It is, that would be David. It's 4 to 6 minutes for the Icebreaker.
4 to 6 minutes.
Yeah. Is that okay, Angie?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, good. Her title tonight, as we get to know her better, is Lessons from My Childhood. Lessons from My Childhood, Angie Smucker. Yay, Angie!
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters. As this is my opportunity to share with you and have you get to know me, and I'm hoping to get to know you. This is what I'm going to talk about, my childhood and lessons that I've learned along the way. In particular, this is important to me because I recently turned 65. So it has made me think that to look back on my life and to pick up on those lessons and actually put them on paper. I found that when I meet somebody from my age group, especially somebody from Chicago, I subconsciously expect that they've had a similar childhood to mine. When in reality, they can be very different, very different. In fact, I recently met a woman who grew up in Chicago, and her father was a backup speaker for Frank Sinatra. So that was extremely different from my childhood. So as a child of in the baby boomer generation, we are children of the greatest generation. And our childhoods often reflected the experiences of those parents of from the greatest generation. In particular, for me, my father was a soldier in the Army for 12 years. And he was in the Big Red One, which was the 1st Infantry Division of General Patton. He earned 3 Purple Hearts and 2 Bronze Stars. So you can imagine that it was a very difficult time for him. And my mother was an English war bride whom my father met when she was 15, and they got married when she was 19. So once they got married and started a family, they had 4 of us children in 1949 to 1959. My sister in 1949 was born in Nuremberg. So, having been a decorated soldier, and we're growing up in Chicago, my father being a decorated soldier, and we're growing up in Chicago, we had to experience some of those, long-lasting traumas that my father was still going through during that period. And over those 10 years of us 4 children being born, those experiences for us as children affected my older sister and brother much more than they affected me and my younger brother. So my first lesson is that birth order matters. It's very important. And siblings can often have completely different memories from their childhood. Even twins can have different memories from their childhood, and we can be affected in different ways from the same experiences that our siblings had in our childhood, let alone people that grew up in the same city around the same time. So that's my first lesson, birth order matters. My second lesson has to do with the fact that my father was 5'6". He always weighed 125 pounds. He was Jewish. And so that tells me my second lesson, size does not matter. Absolutely. It's more about if you're really determined to accomplish something, you can do it. If he can do it, anybody can do it. My third lesson has to do with just the horrible, horrible things of war. They haunted my father his entire life, but especially after he retired. And I've learned that people who have served during wartime especially need to work continually, need to always be busy. And that's my third lesson, that, the more trauma you've had in your life, the less time you want to have to rethink those experiences. So it's a good idea in those situations for those people to constantly be busy, to be working at something. After his experience in the war, my father worked for the Burlington Railroad in Chicago, in the yard, every day of the year. 3 feet of snow, didn't matter. 100 degrees, didn't matter. He went to work at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and he would come home sometimes 8 or 9 o'clock at night. That is my next lesson, how important work is for an individual, but also for a family, to provide a secure, stable life for a family. Because, that was a difficult time, the 1950s and 1960s, very difficult, challenging. And he was able to continue to work to feed us, to provide for the family, regardless of what he was going through or what the rest of us was going through. Again, I want to go back and mention our childhoods, how difficult they were, how traumatic they were, and how fast people learn during that period, say from birth to age 10 or 12, something like that. We often say that if you're going to teach a child a second language, do it as soon as possible. They won't think that it's difficult. They won't know that it's difficult. They're just going to absorb this information. And so my next lesson is just about how impactful childhood experiences can be. And so if you're with somebody who's 50 years old and they're behaving in a way that doesn't make sense to you, it may have some minor or some major relationship to experiences that they had so long ago when we learned like a sponge, when we absorbed lessons like a sponge. So that's that lesson. Another lesson was about the fact that, my father did work so many hours, he was gone so much, and that's difficult. And so I came to understand that children need to spend time with both parents. there's not one parent who's less important than another parent. As a woman, we think that because we carry a child for 9 months, we're more important. But, the child pops out, their consciousness begins. Both parents are very important, and children need to spend all their time with both parents. So during this difficult time, my mother took care of everything in the household. She had a high school diploma, and she took care of everything. And so from that lesson, I learned that if something needs to be done, you got to do it. It's not a good idea to think, I have no idea how to do this. It's a good idea to figure it out and do it. All right. When I was in first grade, I asked my mom, I remember this, what's on TV today? What's on TV? She said, you can read now. You figure it out. Here's the TV schedule. You figure it out. So I learned the next lesson, which is everything you want to know in the world is written down somewhere.
Excuse me, Angie, you're well past 8 minutes now.
Oh,
okay. 4 to 6, so.
See, that was my first one. Okay.
All right, gotta watch the time.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Toastmaster.
Let's give a shout out and cheer for Angie, her icebreaker speech.
Yes, thank you.
It was filled with wisdom, absolutely filled with wisdom. I am thrilled to have this conversation tonight so that we could all learn and grow from the wisdom of Angie. And I'm glad somebody is summarizing it. Thank you, Jim. All right, let's move on to the next part. Adrian, Table Topics. Please join me in welcoming Adrian to our floor.
Fellow Toastmasters and guests, I can't see the list of who doesn't have a role, but I know that Rolando is a guest. So, of course, Rolando, are you willing to participate in Table Topics?
Of course, I'm willing to participate, but I'm not a guest. I'm a member.
Well, you haven't been around it so long. It's like you're a guest. No, you're definitely not a guest. Thank you. Rolando, I would like to know, what is your opinion of something that someone said to you that you had to defend your character? How did you handle that, and what did you do?
Thank you, Madam Toastmasters, fellow Toastmasters, and most welcome guests. If someone told me something that offends me or that attacks my character, first I'll take a step back and think about it. And based on the person, if it's a coworker, a friend, or somebody that I don't know, I'll react differently. So if it's a coworker or a friend that know me, then I'll definitely talk to them, find out what's going on, why they're thinking. I'll try to think about it and try to reason with them why they think of me of such way. What have I done to try to reason with them? If that doesn't work, then if they cannot give me a good reason why they're thinking of this, then I'll counter back. I'll make sure that I'll say something to make them feel the way I'm feeling. But if it's somebody that I don't know, I have no idea who the person is, most likely I'll ignore them because they don't know me. I don't know them. To avoid trouble, I'll just go on with my life and go on what I was about to do and ignore them. But the key thing is I will defend myself when I have to. But if I don't have to, then I will go on. Back to you, Master.
Thank you. Defending our name. We see a lot of that going on in the media now. The Me Too movement is something that is a big topic right now. Some people feel that it's thriving. Some people feel that it's dying out. Monica Tucker, how do you feel about the Me Too movement, and what should we do about it in our society today?
Madam Table Topics Master. Well, when this first started, I was not impressed with the way these people went about bringing things to attention. I felt that it was very inappropriate, that there were methods that should have been used, and it just seemed like everybody was doing it for the attention, and it makes it hard to believe people at some point because it's all me too, me too. And I feel like it just has propagated into other parts of our lives, into areas of politics that it shouldn't be in. There are ways to handle things, and these people, if they truly are having an issue, they need to deal with it so that they can get help from a professional, not in the media. That they're not going to get any help, and it's not really going to help them. So I'll turn it back over to you now, Madam Table Topics.
Thank you. And I know that, Jim, you travel the world a lot with your business. And I'm curious to know, if someone were to come out and make an accusation against you from 40 years ago, how would you address that topic? And how would you even make that relevant?
I'm assuming you're talking to me, right, Andy?
Yes.
Yes. Well, how would I handle an accusation that came up 40 years ago? That'd be a tough one, because usually most of the accusation I said there's no real evidence. It's just I say, you say, and it's very difficult to defend upon that, especially when it starts getting into social media and news, because it can affect the rest of your family. It can affect your job. You know, and it's just an accusation. There's nothing proven on it. And to me, some of these accusations are very difficult for somebody to defend, because it is. There's no actual witnesses. It's just a hearsay that I said and you say. It's like an argument between each other. And, you know, it's very difficult. And I think sometimes the accuser has the advantage because they place doubt in other people's minds about the person that's accused, especially when the accused can't come up with definite excuses or alibis. All they can do is say, no, that's not true. So it can become a very difficult situation. And similar to Monica said, I believe those situations should be handled more privately and not in the public eye at first. Back to you, Adrian. Good question.
Wow, that is awesome. Because I know I had some questionable behavior in college, especially with drinking and parties in the sorority. If someone were to bring that up now on my job, I wouldn't even answer the question. I would say, I'm sorry, but I plead the fifth. So back to you, Madam Toastmaster, and thank you guys for participating. If at this you would please cast your vote for the best table topics speech, that will be great, to either Jim or...
Our vote counter tonight is Chris and Jim Gold. So please forward your vote to them. We had 3 table topic speakers, Rolando, Monica, and Jim Dent. So be sure to vote. At this point, I'd like to go ahead and open it up to hear from
Looks like Carol has been frozen, so let me take
I'm back.
Oh, she's back. Okay.
Yeah, but it says my internet is unstable. So if I jump out again, Roger, you're back in charge. Okay, our vote counter tonight is our vote counter tonight is Jim and Chris. And please.
Chris and Jim.
Chris and Jim, either way. And Rolando was the first speaker, Monica was the second, and Jim Dent was the third. So please forward your vote to Jim. All right, and now I'd like to open it up for our counter. Jim or Chris, are you ready, or do you want to focus on vote counting right now?
What about evaluators?
Oh, yeah.
We still need to get the evaluation stuff, but...
You guys are good.
Calm down. Everything will be fine.
All right, let's go on. Lois Marcolin. Yay! All right, evaluating Norman Dowe's speech. Please join me in welcoming Lois. Yay!
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. Desktop Publishing on a Dime, Part 2. Wow, Norman. Jim Key gave you some advice and you ran with it. The purpose of this speech is actually to take the evaluation to heart and work with it so that you can make that same speech better, stronger, and see where it goes. I loved your speeches. I thought you did a really good job. Your slides had nice pictures. There was a lot that we could learn from just looking at the slides, and what you ended up doing was just adding some words to it. But it was definitely intriguing. It was definitely fun to watch, and I enjoyed it a lot more. Kudos. Those are your high points. I mean, you just nailed it. I also, because I couldn't find anything really on the slides, I started looking at you on the side. And I do notice that you're very comfortable when you're giving your speech. But beware of just doing one of these and you're laying back and you're talking, because we can still see you. So you might want to make sure that you're framed properly and not just kind of laying back there. The only slide, well, there's 2 slides that I personally would have done a little bit different. The one where you were talking about it's free. And you were so excited about it's free. You even had your vocal variety kick in, and it's free. That one I might have had sparks going off and congratulation type things and had free every which way to show your emotion with it, because sometimes your screens can't show your emotion. Also, I think you got to one point where you finally said, I don't want to do these screens anymore. And that's when you were talking about the 4 steps. I would have had, actually it was your next steps, and you had 4 parts on it. I would have had 4 different screens on that. It's difficult because you get to a point you're just like, I don't want to do any more pictures. I just want to finish the presentation. But that was the only one that I could have seen that really could have been broken down a little bit more. Overall, I thought that you did a really good job. Beware of questions. So you opened it up for questions, and I think everybody really enjoyed that. But if you don't know the answer, it's okay to say, I don't know the answer to that. I will find out, and I will get back to you. And that actually tells the user, instead of saying, well, I think it'll import the styles, because it works with styles, and you're trying to work it through in your brain, but you didn't come up with a real answer. Sometimes it's better just to say, I don't know. Let me check it out, and I'll get back to you. But I got to tell you, Norman, this was truly one of my favorite PowerPoint presentations, because I know you and I have talked about getting rid of some of those words, and here it is. You did it. Fabulous, fabulous job. Thank you for redoing this speech. Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you, Lois. Please join me in bringing forth Ben as our evaluator for John Quick's speech. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you. Thank you. Quick show of hands one time. Who was laughing during John's speech? I think everybody. So John, fantastic job. You had the roast today, and the objective was to poke fun at a particular individual in a good-natured way. Sadly, that was David today. Good for everybody else, sad for David a little bit. And I've seen the roast a lot over the years. I've seen a lot of bad roasts, I have to say. Yes, already that everyone was laughing a lot, that was fantastic. So I felt you did 3 things really well. First of all, you had great jokes, and you explained them in a very, very visual way. And what I loved about your jokes were you really balanced something that was known to everybody. Some jokes like the Ring Central joke, right? That was fantastic, the never-ending mantra. And then the joke about the book, the Dummies book that David always has in the back of his screen as well, which is probably a wonderful book, right? But you also shared really new jokes, about the Yags, about how David brought all his friends from his offline club online, right? So that was interesting for a lot of people who don't know David as well as you do. Yeah, so terrific. The second thing I really liked, you did terrific research. I think for doing the roast well, you got to know the person to a certain level, which you definitely do, but you got to research them really well also. So I was impressed how you searched his LinkedIn profile, his short biography, right, and all the past experience speeches where you've seen him during this club. Yeah, so really terrific. The third thing I really loved was your overall delivery. You really hammered it home using gestures well, you know, sometimes with the fist, when you joked about the ring central mantra, and at night you would visualize and repeat it, right? So I really loved that. And also your smile actually worked wonderfully. You know, for some comedians, it just doesn't work when they're smiling too much, but for you, it was beautiful. It was the slightly devilish smile that you need during a roast. Yes, I loved it. And your vocal variety as well contributed overall to your delivery. So really well done. 2 things you could consider improving. Yeah, besides that was really great. The first thing I would suggest, I would maybe take 1 or 2 short jokes or anecdotes out of your speech. Right, so you can slow down a little bit with some of the others. Also, you were kind of on the edge of time. And the second tip, I would have loved to hear a little bit of your own experience. You know, maybe some advice that David gave you in the past, and then you twist it around and make a joke around it, make fun about it. Yeah, but besides that, really fantastic. I mean, this is probably the best roast that I've seen over all my years as a Toastmaster. John, really well done.
Yay, thank you, Ben. On to our third evaluator, Sunny. Please join me in welcoming Sunny in her evaluation of Angela. Yay, Sunny.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster of the Day, and especially Angela. I really enjoyed your opportunity to share with us your first speech, the icebreaker. I didn't have an opportunity to find the correct evaluation, so I'm going to use the general evaluation and what you did well, what you may want to work on, and to challenge yourself. Your title was called Lessons from My Childhood. And I enjoyed your sharing about your family and some of the lessons that you learned growing up in the 50s, the 60s. And you had several lessons. And one of the things that I enjoyed about it is that if you know that there are other baby boomers in the audience, they're probably going to be able to relate well because you know your audience and maybe what they can relate to. And I can certainly relate to what you talked about. I loved your first 3 points. Birth order matters and how it affects you. Being the oldest, it helped me to understand about how life impacts you when you're the oldest. 2, you said size doesn't matter. You talked to us about your dad and that he was a highly decorated veteran and he had a lot of challenges to overcome during the war. But your lesson that you learned was that if your dad at 5'6" and 125 pounds could do it, anyone could. And then you also continued about people who serve in the war, that if they experience a lot of trauma, then one of the things that you seem to have learned is that it would help if they stay busy. And having a veteran husband who actually has served in the Vietnam War, I definitely agree with that. One of the things that you may want to work on is when you're giving a speech, you may not want to give too many points. And I lost you after probably the 5th point. I lost you just a little bit. I know you gave a couple of good ones. Not so much that they weren't good. It's just that I wasn't sure how many more were going to come after that. And if you had talked in your speech and said, I'm going to share with you 4 lessons that I've learned, then you help your audience follow along with you during the speech. And if you say lesson number 1, lesson number 2, those signposts, that's really helpful. What you might want to challenge yourself on is perhaps during your speech, I know this was your first one, but you may want to engage the audience. And maybe since you thought your generation was the best generation, maybe you could have asked, how many baby boomers do we have here today? And that way you get to engage with them. Well, when you were talking with your mom about your mom and she told you to look and search the channels yourself, you may have told us what type of show you were watching at that time, and that would have painted another picture in our mind. But overall, I always love it when someone takes the chance and they get up and they do their first speech. You seem like you even had more lessons to share with us if we hadn't stopped you. So I look forward to hearing much, much more from you. Back to you, Madam Toastmaster of the Day, and kudos, Angela.
Thank you, Sunny. I loved it. And I definitely look forward to more speeches by all three speakers. Angie, you have so much material. We will set aside time to listen to every key point that you raised to us. Thank you. Make sure you get your votes into our vote counters, Jim and Chris. They're happy to collect that information. And they're raising their, Jim, are you raising your hand? No, you're just saying, hey, get it to me, get it to Jim. All right. Timer is saying Lois was 2:30-ish, which means that she may have been over time. Is that meaning she's over time, David?
That the ish means David was slow to start the clock. So no, she was fine.
Okay. All right. Very good.
They
Just
all
double
fall.
checking. All right, good. Okay, let's move on then. So we have next on the list is that I ask for reports. I was so excited about this earlier, and I'm so glad you're patient with me as I have to rein back every now and then. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the grammarian, Adrian, while our vote counters continue to vote. Adrian, tell us about our times as a grammarian. Woohoo!
Awesome. I thought excellent use of words today was Sunny, highly decorated veteran. It really gave us a visual of what you were talking about. Don Quick, slip back and hide behind the keyboard. We can actually see David sliding down in the chair doing that. Angela, rethink those experiences. Jim Dent, excuses or alibis. And Norman, word formatting syndrome and out of sorts. Those were great visual words. Thank you so much. Back to you, Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you, Adrian. Our watcher tonight is Elaine. Elaine, what did you see tonight? Please join me in welcoming Elaine.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster and Toastmasters and the replay watchers who may be our unofficial guests. I'm going to comment on the three speeches and then two other people to highlight. Jim Quick, I loved the contrast of your bright orange shirt. It captured the spirit of everything that you were saying. It was fiery and it was funny. And I noticed you in your excitement of this great roast that you were rocking a little bit, just a tiny bit distracting. But we all loved everything that you were sharing with us, roasting David. Next, Norman. Norman, I just wanted to see you whenever I was looking at you in your little frame. I wanted to see you elevated a little bit higher. Like if from here, if I could have jacked up your chair, I would have done that, but I couldn't do that. Angie, you had, you're well lit. A solid color background is great. If you had been back just a wee bit away from the camera, I would have been able to see a little bit more of your body language because you were telling such rich stories, and that might have just imparted a little extra richness to our experience. Okay, Adrian, oh my gosh, how wonderful to see you with good bandwidth. And maybe you're on a desktop camera tonight, but wow, we could really enjoy you tonight fully and not have the diminishment of either, you know, a mobile device and poor bandwidth. So thank you. And then lastly, to Chris and Jim Gould, I just want to say kudos. You know, we can see you well, you're out on the road in your RV, but yet, you know, it is your studio, well lit, we can see and enjoy your presence. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elaine. Yay! And Elaine, I got a new guest visiting. His name is Plato. All right, on to our next.
Is that Plato or Play-Doh?
This Greek philosopher.
I know. I'm just
not the toy. All right. On to our counter, Jim and Chris.
All right. Go ahead, Chris.
You do that, or?
No.
Madam Toastmaster, everybody did Fairly well. We primarily counted some Oz from the speakers, of course. Angie Smucker had 11, and that's us and you knows. You got to be careful of all of those crutch words. John Quick had 0.
Good job.
That was pretty amazing. Elaine Nieberding, you had 1. Norman Dowe had 8, but mostly I think he only had 1 or 2 during the speech. It was when he started getting relaxed with the questions and answers that he had a few Oz. Ben had 2, and that's it for the Oz, Madam Toastmaster.
Good job.
Thank you so much. Timer, David Carr, anything else to announce? We had 1 over time with our speaker, and I think everybody else was within the realm.
Within the realm, yes.
Okay.
Fine. Yep.
Very good. Back to Jim and Chris with our vote counters. Are you ready to report how we did tonight? Who's our winners?
We are.
All together now. For our speaker today.
That should be the last
one.
one.
Should be last. Okay, table topics. Our best table topic speaker is Rolando today. And our evaluators, our best evaluator, according to the votes today, would be Ben. Good job. And the best speaker for the evening or morning, wherever you happen to be, Toastmaster John Quick with his wonderful roast of David Carr. Madam Toastmaster.
Wonderful. 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 All right, now we have 3 minutes remaining, and it is time for da-da-da. I think I asked for all my helpers. Time for our general evaluator. Please join me in welcoming Roger. Woohoo!
First of all, Jimmy Dent, as a chat monitor, would you give us a quick report?
Yes, the chat was quite enthusiastic this evening, as enthusiastic as everybody looked, which was a good match. We had discussions about football. Geeks on Tour link was posted. Elaine's 31-day Facebook Live challenge was also pasted in a link. We had a discussion about favorite cookies. Each of the speakers had at least 5 comments made about their speech. Great, everybody. And we had 3 comments about 2 different cats, Monica's cat and Carol's cat. So it was quite interesting chat this evening. So if you want all that information, please save the chat before the meeting ends, and you can have the links and other conversations. Back to you, Roger.
Thank you, Jimmy. As your general evaluator, I have 2 comments I want to make. One, kudos first to both Carol and Ben in terms of adding or increasing or enhancing our participation. Carol started off with asking about our favorite cookies, so we start typing and start getting into the story, into the meeting, and there were some responses. Ben also, as another example, when he gave his evaluation asking, hey, who was laughing during the time, that also added more, just in case some of us might have slipped through with our minds to get right back into the meeting. Kudos for both of you. Continue to learn how to do that in all of our activities. The one suggestion that I want to give to all of us, most of us are very good at taking the verbal baton from the person before. Thank you, Table Topic Master. Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. Thank you, Timer. But then after, when we're done, most of us do not necessarily pass the verbal baton back to the next person. I would encourage and challenge you to not only grab the baton, but also give it back verbally. And that is my evaluation of the meeting. Back to you, our Toastmasters of the evening, Carol.
Well, thank you, Roger. And it's right on time. Can you believe this? Whoa. I'm ending it now. We have no guests. Let me double check. Nope, no guests. And Rolando, you will always be in our hearts, regardless whether you're a guest or not. But I know you're a member. So
Thank you.
glad to have you on. It's a pleasure. Make sure you sign up for a role next week, and try not to do so many switches. We had a lot of people changing at the last minute. It happens. but we had a lot of people doing it. So if you would, make sure you sign up early, and that you're able to follow through with that commitment. Thank you, and back to Mr. President. Yay, Jimmy.
Okay, I want to thank everybody for showing up tonight. We had a great meeting. We had 15 members. And don't forget to sign up for a role for next week's meeting or any future meeting beyond that. It's always good to have the agenda fully signed up before we start, but we do have the 15 minutes or so before the meeting to kind of fill in some of the roles. So I want to appreciate everybody. I need to sign off. I've got some things to do this evening. Roger, you got something to say?
I was just going to piggyback. You do want to sign up. You do want to come in early because next week I'll tape Toastmaster of the evening is Elaine Nieberding. So that will be her first time being our Toastmaster of the evening. Let's come back. Let's come in here. And I promise, Elaine, I will not do a roast of you.